In our last video, we took a look at creating a website called Fred Snow for photography, and in this video, we're going to continue on with that. I've got all the files up and running in here, and we're going to create out some of those internal pages, as well as the menu and some other stuff as well. So let's just get started. I'm going to open up Chrome here with the example of our project, and I believe we just had this on Fred at localhost. So I'm opening it up just over here. Also start up my web server so that we can access this. We've got our style sheet and most of our content in here, and we can get started straight away. Let's jump in and have a look at the next page we'll be designing. It's going to be the internal page, and there's going to be a couple of things we have to do here. We're going to have to make sure that we've got a nice H1 tag with some H2 and P tag styling. We also want to create some custom feature images. We'll have one main one here and a secondary one. The rest of it is more or less the same, just that same footer that we were using with Instagram before. So let's jump in and have a look at this. Now, the first thing I'll do is I'll jump into the back end, and I'm just going to go here to the pages, and we're going to create a new page. Let's call this the About Us page, and put this in right here. We'll copy over some of the content we have. We have this H2 tag here, so I'll just label that as H2. And we also have some P tag content in here, so let's put that in as well. These all are spaced correctly, but they didn't copy over the styling properly, so I'm just gonna fix that up right now. Great, and finally we also have these two feature images in here, and for these to work properly we're gonna need to make sure that we have some custom fields, because right now WordPress only gives us the option for one feature image, and we're gonna need more than that. If you haven't used advanced custom fields before, you can jump into Google and just go to their website. They're commonly known as ACF. And when you create an account, you can download a copy of it. It's normally free for normal use, but there's also a developer version, which makes life a little bit easier. Let's jump in now and install this plugin. So I'm just going to save and publish this page over here. I'm going to jump into plugins now and add this plugin we just downloaded. I'm just going to hit upload here, and I'm going to choose the file for the ACF. Now, let's jump in here and pull it in. I wonder if I can drag and drop it. So I can't, oh, there we go. We can't actually drag and drop it. So we'll do that. Great, so that's unzipping. And what we'll be able to do is jump in here and activate it. Once we have that, we can jump into ACF and create a new one. We'll do one here for general pages. So page ACF is what we'll title it, and we'll create a new one called feature image 2 maybe, or second feature image. So I've put that in there, and I might just capitalize this a little bit. And this here will be an image as the content. It'll preview as medium. Yeah, preview will be medium. And what we might do is we might just pull out the image URL. I think that should be perfect. Let's save that and just make sure that it only applies to pages. So if page type is equal to, let's see, equal to default template, page type is, we've got a couple of different options in here. So normally I like to make sure that, here we go. So if post type is equal to page, then this ACF will be applied. So what we can do now is we can go to the pages and we can jump in here to the About Us page. When we do that, we'll see that we have an additional ACF image we can add in here. So let's pull out these two images and save them so that we can put them into our design. I'm just going to select this one over here and export this one. I'll select to export it as a JPG for the web, and we'll put this into our image folder as well as this one over here. And let's save, selected, JPG image. Great, so we've got those two. Let's jump into the folder path for those. So I'm just going to jump in here. And over here, we've got those images that we saved. And I'm going to rename these. And I'm going to resize them as well, because right now they're a little bit too large for use. And at 2 megs, it'll actually be an SEO issue. So I'm just going to open up Photoshop here, and I'm going to resize both of them. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put them into WordPress, upload them, and place them into this post. Once we do that, we can start customizing them. So here's Photoshop with our image. Let's resize it. I'm just going to resize this one to 80 pixels. Save this as a JPG. And we'll put that straight into the images folder for the time being. We'll call this page feature 1. And let's grab the other one, which was here, I believe. We'll open this up, resize it to 1280, so it's the same again. And we'll save that as a JPG as well. We'll call this page feature -2. With those two done, we can close off Photoshop for now. And we can jump in here and we can upload them. So for the first one, let's have a look. That is the one with the pineapple. So I'm just going to pull this in here. And the second one is over here. So I'm going to put that in as well. Great. So we've got the two there. We can save that and let's preview and have a look at what our page looks like right now. So as you can see, the design here doesn't really match what we're trying to go for just yet. What we need to do is we're going to have to customize this post a little bit. Now, we're going to have to remove this sidebar. So we can do this straight away in WordPress. We'll just jump into Customize. And here for the widgets, we could even maybe keep this in because the sidebar could be later used for some of the content. Let's see what we have here. So it does look like we do have a bit of a sidebar that could be used for a couple of things, but I think manually setting it might be a little bit better for the time being. So what I'm going to do is in WordPress here, we'll click Customize and we'll go to the home page. We'll have a look at the widgets. So here we've got a right sidebar and we want to remove that. But to be honest, I don't want any sidebars at all. So here we've got a theme layout settings and we're going to click no sidebars for this. When we hit save, that should automatically apply. And there, we've lost our sidebar now. The next thing we can do is jump into the page over here. And this is just page.php. Here it is. And we can start customizing this. So right now we want to create a nice big boxy layout here for the main content. We want to create a second section here for the images. So for this boxy layout, we're just using the secondary color and it's got quite a bit of padding. Let's have a look how much padding it has. It's got about 150 pixels from the top and 150 pixels from the left. So let's jump in here to the main. And what we'll do is we'll create a new style here for main. And we'll do the padding of 150 pixels with a background color of that secondary color. Let's apply that to start off with and see what we get. So that's that styling there. If we take a look at the content itself, it sort of is a little bit centered and we don't really want that. So we're going to have to remove some of this wrapping containing rows that we're getting here. And we might have to wrap this manually. So let's jump in here and have a look at how we can do that. So right now we've got all this other stuff, but let's move this all the way out. And we'll put this into a div, which will be very similar to some of the other stuff we've had earlier on the home page. Let's jump in here to the home page and copy this over. We've got the margin from the left, so we're probably wanting to use that in this case. So we'll go back to the page here and let's apply that div in here. And we'll also put in another div class here, and we might call this something like a page holder, maybe? let's try that out for now. And the rest can stay more or less the same. We're just missing the closing tag over here. So I'm just going to put that in, I believe goes in here. Great. Let's save that for the time being and take a look at what we get. So that's aligning a little bit better. It's not making its way all the way to the left. Let's see why that might be. So if we take a look at our content, we sort of do want this to fill in the space. And maybe it's the content inside that we want a little bit better described. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back into the CSS here and remove this padding. And instead, I'm going to swap these two classes around where we had for the page. Instead of having the site in here, I'm going to put a margin from the left inside instead. Let's give that a test and see how it goes. So now if we apply it, it's fitting out a little bit better. This is closer to how we want it to work. The only difference being that we don't want the feature image to show up, and we can still update a bit of the content in here. So what we'll do is we'll jump here into the loop. So the loop is what happens when it's presenting the content of the page. Right now we've got a header here, so I might remove that to start off with. And that'll remove the title there. And we also have a thumbnail, so I'm going to remove that as well. Now we've just got the content in here. We can style this to start off with. Now, if we take a look at the styling here, it does need a lot of padding from the top. So we can apply this in here. Let's do padding top 150 pixels and just make sure that's working okay. So that's working good. Then we also want a margin from the top, and this might only be 30 pixels. So that's okay, I think. Just need to have a look. We need this title above it as well. So what we'll do is we'll jump in here and if we have a look, before we had this title which was being displayed. So here in the page, we can manually create a div for that. And this div might be that margin from the left, which will be empty for the time being. And here we can create that h1 class. And that h1 class can be sort of a copy of what we had here before, where it was creating a title for us. I'm going to paste this thing here, which is a WordPress shortcode or function anyway for the title, and apply that. So that's got the title in there. We'll have to style this out a little bit as well. So let's take a look at the current styling we have on the main Fred Snow website by jumping back a page. Here we've got quite a large title, and if we took a look at the styling for that, it's using this home banner h3 tag styling. So I'm going to copy that across. We've defined this somewhere over here, so I'm going to copy it completely across. Scroll down here and create a new class. Now this class will essentially have to be a h1 holder inside our page. So I'm just going to maybe do this as a what should we call this? Maybe page header. And in page header, we'll do the h1 tag. So we'll have to create this parent class. So we can just create it in here. Great. Let's save that and refresh and see how it looks. So that's looking a lot better already. We can probably even remove some of the margin from the top we applied there. And that way our content will fit in a little bit better. So now if we zoom into 100% and scroll in to have a look at this content, we can see that there's no margin at the bottom there. So we're going to have to remove that. We've got a margin bottom here of 80 pixels. So I'm just going to remove that for the time being. We'll keep the margin from the top so it's consistent with the rest of our design. And that's looking a little bit better. Now we just need to customize the text in here. So right now, if you take a look at that, it's a H2 text with about 60 pixels as well, whereas this one is 90 pixels. So let's see if we've got any tags we've used previously. That's about 60 pixels. I think we have one probably somewhere. Let's have a look. Maybe we could even reuse this one again, but we'll redefine how it's being used. So let's create a h2 tag here. Let's have a look over here. So let's paste this in below. Not that one. This one over here. And what we'll do is we'll create maybe a we'll create maybe a font size of 60 here, and an XL, maybe that'll reduce down to 48 pixels, and maybe that then will reduce down to say 36 pixels, and maybe finally reduce down to 30 pixels for the smaller size. In terms of the margins, I might just remove those altogether, and let's give that a test and see how it looks. So that's all right. If we take a look here, the line height also decreases quite a lot. Now this line height almost looks okay. We could probably make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to do it as 1 and see how that looks. So that looks a little bit better. And finally, the paragraph text here. This is font size 24. It's quite large and it's quite light as well. So let's jump in here. Do font size 24 pixels, font weight. Now seeing we're doing this is 24 pixels. I might jump all the way to the top here and just do a font size of 24 pixels so that everything is that size. So when we apply that, that looks a little bit better. The only problem is that some of our styling for all the elements around are a little bit out of whack right now. So let's double check what's happened here. So yeah, a lot of these elements now are much larger than they were before. And in order to fix this up, we might remove it here from the top, and we'll fix it down here. We'll only apply it in the main class. So that way it should revert everything else back, while these classes here have that design font applied. Great. Now what we'll want to do is we'll also want to create some responsive design choices here to make that font a little bit smaller when we go down the sizing. So here we might only want it to be 20 pixels, and then on the SM level maybe only 18 pixels. Let's save that, and we might want to do some padding adjustments as well. So if we have a look here and zoom in, then at about the MD level, we want probably the padding top to only be about 80 pixels. And obviously at the SM level, maybe only about 60 pixels. So let's apply that and see how that looks. So I think that's looking a little bit better. I'll zoom out now. So great, I'm happy with that. And we also need some padding from the bottom. We want to keep it consistent, so we're going to have it at 150 as well. And we're just going to copy over the same changes that we have for each responsive design version. So let's save that and have a look. And there we go. So we've got that from the bottom too. We also want the font weight to be about 300, which is that lighter version. And that's applied just there. So that's great. Finally, this here, we're defining this as a base color. So we shouldn't use that manually. Just gonna put that in as the variable instead. I think that covers all of that. So now we've got the content in here. We also have some padding there from the right. So to do that, I'm just gonna put it in here. We've got padding. Well, actually, maybe I'll just leave it for the time being. We want to put that image there on the right now. And if we take a look at it, it's a certain block size here. This block, if we have a look at the width, it's almost 50%. It's 940 pixels, and this one here is about 800 pixels. So that's probably as close to 50-50 as you can get. Let's see how we can cut these up into two sections. What we have is we've got our page here, and we've got a page holder. This page holder is the one that currently has the color for us. We also have a page header, and all this wrapper stuff, we don't need that, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now for this page holder with this margin from the left, we might have to give that a parent div. So I might call this page holder left, and we'll put that in here. On top of that, we might need another class called page holder right. And this here might also have to be back to back with a certain section. So let's double check the page holder styling here. Where has it gone? I don't think we've actually created any yet. That's fine. So what we could do is we could pull this out, and that can be the parent class. We've got page holder with page holder left and page holder right. Let's create some styling for this. I'm going to jump in here and create those classes. We're going to create the one from the left, and we're going to create the one from the right. Let's save that and just make sure that our design still works properly. So it's working just fine. Now for the page holder, we're going to do that as a display of flex. Now for the left and the right, we're going to have those as both flex1 and flex1. Start off with, this should just make them half sized for both sides. But obviously this one here is technically a little bit bigger. So what I might do is this one might be 0.85 and this one might be 1.15. And sorry, the other way around. So that way the one with the content has a little bit more room. That's a little bit better. Next, we'll need to re-add that padding there. We're going to do padding from the right at 150, and I'm going to reduce this as we go down each level. So this might be 80, and this over here might only be 30. So that way we can fit our content in a little bit better. And then on the right side here, this is the right holder. This is where we need to put our two images in. Now the first one, it's got a height of maybe 475 pixels. So we'll jump in here and we'll call this maybe feature image 1. And let's pull this in and create a class for it. Feature image 1. This has the height here of 475 pixels, and maybe we'll do a background color of base just so that we can see it for now. See what it looks like. So there it is. The first thing we'll notice is that we don't have that gap that we do in the design. If we take a look at that gap, it's about 30 pixels. So what we'll need to do is we'll jump in here and we'll do padding left 30 pixels. Our content can still stay in there, but it's just got that bit of a padding set. That looks a little bit better. And the next thing we can do is we can pull in the feature image and replace the content in here. But we still need one more feature image. So let's copy this over and do feature image 2. For feature image 2, it's a bit bigger. Let's have a look how big this one is. It's about 1,000 pixels. I'm just going to do height 1,050 pixels. Save and put this as a secondary color so that we can see that as well. And this one has a margin bottom of 30 pixels just so that we can have the two slightly off center. Now that color might not be the best one to use right now. We still haven't put in the tag in here for that. So let's just quickly put that in and then we can actually test it out. Great, so there it is. Obviously margin isn't spelled correctly, so it's not applying, but once we do put it in, there it is. So we've got the first one and we've got the second one, and we can put the pictures in there now. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump in here to the page. And for feature image 1, we're going to use a special type of tag that I normally do. This is has post thumbnail. This checks whether WordPress actually has a thumbnail for its feature image. And if it does, then we can create our own class here to add some styling to feature image 1. But if a thumbnail doesn't even exist, we're not going to even show this class. Then what we're going to do is we're going to manually set a background image with a URL. And this will get the URL for the thumbnail and paste it in here. Let's save that and have a look if it works. So it has. We still don't have any styling for the size of the background image there, but we can apply that in now. Let's jump in here and do background-image. And what we'll do is background position can be center, background size can be cover, and background repeat can be none, for example. I think it's no repeat. There we go. We can apply this as well below. So we'll save that here. And let's double check. So that looks like it's applied quite well. But we need one here for the second feature image. And this is going to be a little bit different. As you remember, we created a custom WordPress field for that one. And that's over here. We're going to have to pull in this variable that we've created, which is the field name. And I want to use a similar syntax for that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create an if script. And this if script will check if there is a field for this variable over here. And if there is, it'll create the class over here to create a feature image. Great. And then I think I've accidentally deleted something over here. Let's see. Div. No, that's fine. So then what we'll do is if there is that field, then we'll apply the same sort of a styling over here. So let's paste that in, and let's paste that in over here. And what this will do is instead of getting the thumbnail URL, it'll echo out getting the second feature image URL. Let's save that and see if it works. Great. So there it is, and that seems to be working quite well. If we edit the page and say remove the feature image for one of those and jump back in, then it's only displaying that first one, and that's essentially what we wanted to do. So let's go back in here and add it back in. Great, we'll save that. And we'll need to check out the responsive elements for this right now, because in our design, if we take a look at this, it's going to have to change a little bit when we get down to a smaller page size. Ideally, these images will break to the bottom. So let's test that out. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just shrink this page down a little bit and decide when I want it to break. I think already here, it needs to start looking at getting smaller. Like I can tell already the padding on the right and left here is a little bit too large for this page. So what I might do is over here, when we get down to XL, the padding that we're applying on the right hand side could probably go down to 80 already. Let's refresh that and give it a test. Great, so that's looking a little bit better. Then maybe when we get down to LG, we could probably push this padding down to even 60 from the left. Let's take a look and see how that works. This is, yep, a little bit better. I think I might make the font a bit smaller a bit earlier too, maybe at that LG level. Let's refresh that and see if that applies. So that's applying just about here. And in terms of the images themselves, that's still okay for the time being. But when we get down to that MD level, I'll probably want it to collapse. So let's scroll down here. And what we'll do is when we get to MD, I'm going to make this a display of block. So that way those flex values don't really take any effect. And I'm going to remove this padding from the left, set it back to 0. But I'm going to create some padding from the top. And we'll do that as 30 pixels. So let's see how that works. This is about that level here. And there we go. So the other thing we could probably do is have those images. Actually, maybe we'll leave that as a flex and refresh that just to see All right, so they definitely need to go. But this section here, where we've got those two images, maybe that's when we apply a flex for those, because then they can be back to back. Let's give that a test. So over here, I'm going to copy over this media query, which we already have on MD, and apply it in here. And what I'll do is I'll have this as a flex of 1, and this can be a flex of 1. So it won't take effect until we get to that responsive level. But when we do, then we might also want to remove some of the height on those. We might give this one over here equal heights. So this one doesn't really have to update, but the one on the bottom does. So that looks good. We probably only want to make sure that there's also some margin here from the left. So to do that, I might just do margin left 30 pixels here. Refresh that and see how that works. Great. So that's looking good. So as we get bigger here, that works. And that fits in really well. Let's collapse that out a little bit. And when we get to this point, we have a nice group of images. And then maybe when we go down one more level to SM, we'll put this back to a block. And this is where we might update the padding a little bit, maybe. Let's have a look. So yeah, there we go. We'll have to create a responsive element here where the margin from the left goes back to 0, but maybe the margin from the bottom goes 30 pixels. Let's give that a shot. Great. So that looks good. We could probably even make the height a little bit smaller, maybe 300 pixels for both of those, just so that they're not utilizing too much room. I'll just apply that in here for the media queries, and those should take effect. Great. So now we've got a very responsive page layout here that works. And if we take a look at our design, the only difference now that we need to adapt is a slight margin here at the bottom. And this is a height of about 100 pixels. So all we'll do is in here where we've got the page holder, just do margin bottom and do that at 100 pixels. Let's save that, make sure it applies. So that's applying well. And we'll just create one more responsive query for that, where it might get to about 60 pixels on ND, maybe 30 pixels on SM. Great, let's resize that. That's good. And finally here, great. We've got that page version now, and that's looking really good. But this logo here isn't responsive. So what I'm going to do is isn't linkable. So I'm jumping in here. I want to go to our logo, and that's going to be, where is it? Here it is. And we've got a logo class here, and I'm going to just turn this into an A tag. And this will just go to the root of the website. So that's simple enough. Let's test this out and give it a shot. Okay, so that's looking good. And we don't have a menu yet, but if we go back to the About Us page, that looks like it's all working. So I'm pretty happy with that. We can take a look at the next part to build for this website. And that'll be the Contact Us page. The Contact Us page is very custom from what we can see here. It's got a map, but it follows the similar type of structure we set up here for the About Us page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse a lot of these elements that we created earlier, but I'm going to create a custom page type. I'm going to do a new file here with a template called contactus.php. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy over some of the content that we have and paste it in here, except this will be a template of contact. I'll scroll to the bottom over here and I'll throw in the footer as well. This gives us the building blocks, but we also want it to be similar to the page we created earlier. I'm going to copy over this page layout and I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to paste in most of this content and just see how that works to start off with. we'll create a new page in WordPress and we'll call this Contact Us. In the page templates, we do have that template for contact now, and we can apply this. I'm just going to put in some of that content that we had in the design, such as we'd love to help as an A2 tag, and maybe some of the contact information, which we don't have to style just yet. We'll also create a fake feature image just to make sure that's working too. So there it is, and it looks like most of those variables have come across quite well. We do need to change the picture, and we've got one here. So I'm going to export this one, and we'll export this as JPEG straight into the images folder. And this is just over here. Right now, that seems to be fine in terms of the size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this straight into our website. Let's edit this page. And here I'm just going to drag and drop it and apply it as the feature image. Now we don't need this custom page feature image. We need a contact form we need a Google map here with a location. And this is usually an iframe. I'm going to have to manually put this in. So what we might do is, instead of having this secondary feature image in here, we'll apply this, this map essentially. And I might do this as an iframe in here. But for the time being, I'm just going to call this the class of iframe, just as an example. And finally, I'll jump in here and have a look where we had that page holder before. So this is just over here, and here is where I'll create the iframe holder. And for the time being, I'll just create this as a background of base, and it'll have a position of absolute. Top will be top, bottom, left and right will all be 0. So it uses the full 100% width and the full 100% height of this. Later we can apply this class to our iframe, and it'll utilize all this styling. But for now, this div will take the root of this styling. We'll also make sure that the parent is a position relative so that it's using up all that space. So with that done, we can jump into our page, and ideally this section here is ready to go. Now it's a little bit too big. What I might do is I might create a very similar layout to that iframe holder that we have, but instead of having all of this like that, we're just going to have it default straight to 475 pixels. And this can be iframe-holder. Then we'll put the iframe in here. Finally, we'll copy over this and create this and replace the feature image too with an iframe holder. Let's save that, refresh our page and take a look, and that's looking a lot better. So I think we actually have an address for them, and that's the one over here. So we're going to grab a Google iframe map for them right now. And this is easy enough to do. We're just going to click over here and we're going to click share. We're going to click embed map, and here's our iframe. We can jump back into our code now and paste this straight in here. We'll also paste in the class. We'll remove the height and width because this will be set by our CSS, and save that. Let's now have a look at our page. When we refresh, here's our iframe, and that looks like it's working really well. We only need to fill out some of the extra content in here and put in a contact form, which is easy enough to do. Let's jump in here and create a new contact form. And we'll call this maybe Contact Us page. We take a look at the context here. We just need a name, email, phone, and message. So I'm just going to create that over here. The only thing I'll change is the phone here from subject to phone. And we'll put placeholders for each because we don't actually want all these labels. We will just want the inputs. I'm going to delete most of this content over here. And what we'll do is we'll create the placeholders by just typing in placeholder and putting in here your name and copying that over a few times. Placeholder. Beautiful. Let's do that over here. And let's rename all of these. So this will be email. This will be phone, and this here will be message. So let's save that and give it a test. We've got a shortcode here, and we can put this straight into our page. If we have a look at our page over here, we'll just click edit, and underneath the number, we'll copy over some of the other items here. So the other one was the email address. We'll paste that in, and the third one was the address as well. So we'll paste that in as well, and the contact form to finish it off. We'll go here to contact us, and here's that form that we created. It's got a bit too much spacing, and that's because unfortunately WordPress likes to add p tags whenever you do a line break. So by removing that spacing, that should fix that up. So let's have a look at our page now and refresh once more. That's looking a little bit better. And finally, we just have to style these inputs. Now we've got some input styling we created earlier, which is just over here. So I'm going to use that. And down here, where we've got a page holder with some content and stuff, in our main section even maybe, we can put that input in there and we can override the inputs that are currently happening. So let's refresh that. Paste it in and have a look. So that's looking okay. We just need to make sure that it's applied to the text area and that the background on these are white. Let's refresh once more, have a look. So that's looking a little bit better. And let's double check our design. We also have some margins there. So we'll do margin bottom, maybe 0.5 EM. Let's give that a shot. There we go. So there's our contact form. And that's looking good. It's similar to our design. We probably don't need so many rows on the text input. So we could jump in here, for example, and just do X3, just so that it's 3 rows, and give that a shot. There we go. And that's our contact us page. If we take a look at our design, it's looking good. We could probably have a little bit of margin there from each one of our elements. And we need some icons there as well for these links. So let's do that. Over here for the page, we'll jump into the editor and we'll add in those icons. They should be simple enough to add. In here, we'll just do an I tag for class of FA-phone, and FA-FW, so it's a consistent width. We'll apply that and paste it in a couple of times here. For this one here, we'll do envelope-O, and this one here can be map. With those done, we could probably also create an A tag to control these. So I'm just going to create one over here and close it. And I'm going to do that for each one of these and paste that in below. Finally, we want to also make sure that these work properly. So what we'll do is this will be a phone number. So we'll do tel with the number that we're using. This one here will be an email address. So it'll be mail to. Right. And this last one here is the map. And here for the map, what we can do is we can use the embedded link with a short link address for sharing, and we can paste this straight in here. Finally, these all can be in a parent div, and this parent div, I can give it a class name of something like contact us info. So what happens now is in our styling, we can jump in and create some custom styling for this. Now over here, let's jump into this section and we'll create that class for contact us, and for A tags in here, we'll set the color as base. If we take a look, then we also want some margins. So we'll do margin top, maybe this will be 60 pixels, and margin bottom will also be 60 pixels. That way it's got some room to breathe there a little bit. Now if we take a look, that's looking much better. I'm pretty happy with that, and our contact page now is pretty much done. We can move on to the next part. Now something I've noticed is this Instagram holder isn't showing up on all our pages, so we need to fix that too. Right now it's probably just here on our home page, which it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out of the home page. I'm going to jump into our footer.php, and I'm just going to paste this up here at the top. That way, when we refresh this page, there it is, it's on our footer, and we can make sure that this is on all our pages in the future. Great. So now we can move on to the next part. The next part I wanted to have a look at is creating the menu. So this is the menu here. It's our site navigation. And what we've done here is we've got a button at the top right here that we click. When we click this button, then the site navigation appears overlaying on whatever our web page currently is. It has 3 different menus here. It's got the main site navigation, it's got the categories, and it's got a blog section here as well. Finally, it's got a small contact form so that if you do want to contact, you can do that immediately. While it's a bit redundant, it's just useful in case people are looking for that bit of information. Normally, I would do this by creating those 3 menus in WordPress and also creating a JavaScript function so that when we do select this button, that navigation appears. We'll be able to also make sure that this navigation works well for the mobile by simply collapsing these rows and columns down to a single row. So let's take a look at making this. Alright, so we'll have a look here at creating the navigation, possibly in the header.php. This is usually the best spot because it'll be on all the pages. And we sort of want it to exist almost as a top level element. So over here, I'm going to create an ID for it. And this might be something like a menu-overlay. Let's paste that in here. And what we'll do is we'll create some CSS for that too. So let's close out of all our other pages. And we'll open up a new theme, a new style here for the menu overlay. And over here in the header, we'll double check the design for this. So if we jump here to Fred Snow, and what we do is we'll have a look at more or less the layout for it. So as you can see, it's utilizing most of the room minus the top and the left side there. So that's okay. And it has a color of that base background color. To start off with, what I'm going to do for it is I'm going to make sure that it has a position of absolute. For this position, I'll make it go top, bottom, left, and right, utilizing all the space. We'll do the background to base. Let's first check to make sure that this is applying. I'm going to refresh here and we can see that it has taken effect, but we haven't added a Z index to it. So we're going to add that in just so that it's a top level component. We're going to give it a Z index of 2000, which is higher than anything else we have. So now we can see that it does exist there. The only other aspect is that it's not actually scrolling with the page. So to fix that, we'll have to change this to a position of fixed. And that'll make sure that it exists on top of our page. Doesn't matter where we're going to scroll. So that looks good. The other thing we might want to do is double check that the menu underneath, which is this one here, I believe, that exists. Let me double check where that is. This top menu, right, exists on top of the menu for the menu overlay. So let's find that. That's over here. And right now it doesn't have a Z index, so I'm going to give it a Z index of 3000. We want it to be present on top. So there we go. And we can restyle this a little bit in. Now it's still utilizing a little bit too much room, and we'll want to update it so that it reflects the margin from the left design that we have. So over here, here's an example of that. And I believe we also have some content here. So let's double check quickly. Yeah, so we're going to give it some margins from the left there, but this isn't exactly it. Let's see how we're currently doing the left side holder. So this is the left side holder, and this is the aspect we essentially want to copy over. So let's scroll down here, and for the menu, what we're going to do is this section here, which is currently set as the width, we're going to set this as the left-hand position. And what happens is when we get the media responsive query here on this aspect, we're going to set this back to 0. So let's give that a test and make sure that the padding there on the left exists. So that's a little bit better. That exists now. The next aspect is for that top navigation bar. So this currently has a height of 50 pixels. And in a way, we want to keep that. So what we're going to do is this section here from the top now, we're going to set this 50 pixels from the top. If we save that and refresh, we should see our navigation there at the top. Now it's not exactly accurate because we've got this admin bar. So I'm going to remove this admin bar for the time being and jump back into the web page. But there we go. So now that menu is showing up accurately sized. And finally, what we want to do is for the body tag over here, we're going to do an and class, and maybe we'll do if menu is active. And this might be an actual if statement, then this will have an overflow of hidden. So in this case, I'm going to apply it just so that we see what that looks like. If we refresh now, we can see that we've lost the ability to scroll on our page, and this is essentially what we want to do. And now the main focus here is on the actual menu itself. With that done, what we can do is start putting in some of that content. But before we even get there, let's make some of these menu items actually work. And to do that, we're going to have to pull in some custom JavaScript. Now I've already got a custom.js file in here, which gets created whenever I run the functions file over here and import a file called moshi.php, which exists over here. This then actually calls in a couple of libraries, including enqueuing this script for my custom.js. So that's called whenever I'm running any page. And here we can create a new function. And this function can be something very simple, such as toggle menu. And this can be a simple toggle, but we're going to toggle a couple of items here. What we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the header item here for the menu overlay. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use jQuery, which is over here like this, and pass in the ID for this tag. We're going to remove the class, or we're going to toggle the class actually. And the class we're going to toggle is active. And we're going to toggle it on a few items. We're also going to toggle it on the main body of our page. And in this case, we want to toggle that class that we created down here. And this class will be, where is it? If menu is active. We're going to place this on the body tag. And with these two things done, we should be able to get started. We might not even need this one here, actually, because we can apply it straight through the body tag. So let's get rid of that. And this is a very nice, simple function. We're going to jump into our header. And we're going to go over here to that menu that we created. And here we've got the menu section. So we're going to call a JavaScript function. And this function here is going to call the toggle. I think that's how it's done. Let me double check. There we go. So that's great. Then we're going to apply different styling when that's done. So what we're going to do here is in the body with a @if menu is active. What we're going to do is for this menu overlay, we're going to set the visibility to visible. We're going to select the opacity to 1. And that's about it. Otherwise, over here, we could set the visibility to hidden and the opacity to 0. Great. So with that done, we can give it a test. Let's just move this down below so that it's got priority. And the only other thing here that we want to do is also set the overflow to hidden when we select that. So I'm going to remove that from up over here, just so that it's a bit more central in terms of where this applies. We can jump into our page now. And over here, I'm going to select this button. And right now it looks like nothing's happening. So let's double check what's going on. Here it says toggle menu is not set yet. So we're going to jump back in here, double check. So it does exist. It's very possible we haven't refreshed the styling and content. It might be cached. I'm just going to try that again. And there we go. So we're getting that working, which is really cool. Now we're going to add some animation to that too. So that's easy to do. We simply do maybe a transition of ease with 0.25 seconds on all elements. Let's refresh and see how that looks. I don't think that's taken effect just yet. Maybe let's go to the About Us page and try that again. So there we go. That's taken effect now. And we can see that it's transitioning in and out. The only other thing I can think of that we could do is a transform. Now we could do a transform here of maybe something like scale on the x-axis. And this could start off as 0. Then when our item comes into view, we can scale this back up to 1. Let's try this out and see what it looks like. Let's hit menu, and now it sort of expands out. So that's really cool. It's sort of ideally like a photo camera, but maybe a photo camera goes on the y-axis. So let's see how that works. Let's refresh that and try that again. We'll refresh to make sure the styling appears. So that's cool. I suppose we can play around with some of these elements. I do know on the x-axis we might have a lot of content, so it might not look good in the future. So I'll just do it on the on the y-axis. So I'll just do it on the x-axis for the time being. And yeah, that's looking good. So now we can create some of the content in this menu. And for this menu overlay, we'll also want to do an overflow Y of scroll. We're not going to use this just yet, but it's sort of going to be there in the background when we do need to use it. And I think that's about it. Let's have a look at what kind of content we're putting in here. So to start off with, we're going to need the same logo in here. So what we might do is for the logo, I believe it's already set somewhere in here. Let's jump into our header and have a look where it's set. It's set just over here, top logo holder. I'm going to jump into the CSS here, and I'm also going to make sure that this has a higher level of z-index, 3000 in this case. And let's see if it just appears when we hit our menu. There it is. The only other difference is that the actual logo here needs to have some sort of a way to invert its colors, and we can do that too. So what we do here is we've got all this content. So when we have an active body tag, we're going to remove a lot of this, but we're going to jump here into the logo and we're going to invert its colors. Let's see how we can do this. Ideally, this should be as simple as typing here into the filter invert, and we're going to, whoops, that's not invert, invert. We're going to set this to 100%. On top of that, let's go to this logo class and we'll do a transition here. This will be ease 0.25 seconds on all aspects. Let's go back and now take a look at our web page. We're going to hit menu here and we can see that the logo is inverting. So that's pretty cool. And now we can take a look at the next bit of our content here. We're going to create this huge site navigation H1 tag. And in this case, it's not really a H1 tag. It's probably just going to be a title. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump here into the menu overlay, and I'm just going to create a title here. And this title will be our site navigation. Let's put this in here. And what we want to do is we want to copy over some of the styling for those H1 elements that we've created in the past. So here's an example of that. We're going to scroll down and apply it in here for our menu overlay. So let's do title over here and paste that in. We're just going to remove the high level component sections there. and refresh that and give it a test. We might also have to make sure that the HTML is saved, but I think it is. The only other aspect here is that we need to make the color for all items white. If we take a look at the links, they also need to be white. So I'm just going to paste that in straight underneath, just so that they're visible against the background color. So now if we refresh and have a look, there's our site navigation. The only other issue is that it's using up some of that space that the title is using. So we'll have to add some padding to our menu overlay. The padding will have to be made up as we go because the sizing on here is sort of dynamic. So I'm going to do about 250 pixels, maybe even just 200. That looks good. And the other aspect is we might need that margin from the left, which is a class over here. So I'm going to paste that in and we're just going to simply use it. And that way everything still aligns correctly according to how most of our content is addressed. So there we go. And that's looking much better now. If we take a look, yep. So that looks good. I'm happy with that so far. Everything seems to be fitting in very well. The only issue I have is that this menu and the scroll bar seem to be overlapping, but we can take a look at that a little bit later. For the next part, we're going to actually have to have a menu that will display on the site. So we're going to jump here into WordPress and go to Appearance and Menus. And here we're going to create our first menu for the site navigation. So we'll literally call it that. And right now we'll have a few links to start off with, which is Home, About Us, Services, and FAQ. So let's put that in there. Home is already the home page. That's fine. We've got the About Us and Contact Us. Remove this sample one and create some empty links for the others. Here I'll make one called Services and put that in here. We'll also need one called FAQs. Let's put that in here. Underneath that we have testimonials. So let's copy that in as well. Give that a capital T. And finally, we also have Contact Us, which we already have. So I'm going to save this now and create this menu. And this can be our primary menu. We also have another one here for our collections. So let's create that as well. We'll jump in here to create a new menu. And this one will be our collections. What we'll do is we'll copy over some of these example categories that we have in here. So let's jump in, and these can all be just custom links. I'm just gonna start copying them across and we should be able to use them. Let's put this one in for the photo journals. Let's put this one here in for the accessories as well. We've got one here for gifts. Let's put that in here. After that, we have repurposed graphics, I guess. Let's put that in here. We've got this one for albums. We'll put that in as well. And the final one here for bestsellers. So let's paste that in, bestsellers. For each one of these, I'm just giving a hashtag for the URL because they don't really exist yet. But that's enough to get us started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the About Us page again because it doesn't have any animation. And I'm going to open up the menu here. Now in WordPress, whenever you have a header, there is a function by WordPress which automatically pulls in the menu. So let's use that to create our very first primary menu. Understrap provides a pre-made one. So we're going to try and paste that in here. And this is sort of what it looks like. It's pretty standard. Just gonna paste it in without any animation per se. So I'm gonna remove this array, sorry, these custom settings, but the rest will be pretty stock standard. And what we want to do here is take a look at how it works. Now, right now it's got a depth of 2 with some navigation items here that are applying. So let's see what this looks like from the get-go. If we take a look at it and refresh here, I'm not actually seeing anything. Let's have a look at the CSS here. So here it is. It's got a display of none. I'm not too sure why, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the collapse here. I'm going to remove the theme location for primary. I'm going to remove this nav drop down and this menu class. I'm going to also remove the ID from here, and the rest I'm going to keep the same. So that should lose all the styling. And there we go. We just have a normal list, and each one of these are essentially our menu items, but they're not the menu I was looking for. What have I done wrong here? Let's have a look. So here I needed to be the theme location primary. I think that's what was wrong. So let's refresh and try again. And that's better. So that's pulling in the primary menu now, which is what we want. And we can begin to style this now. So to style it, we're going to have a look at what we're doing here. We created styling for this earlier with some of our categories on our page. So we can really reuse that. If we go to the main website here and we scroll down a little bit, we created styling here for these categories. Here they are. And this was under Home Collections categories. I'm going to jump into our navigation here, our style sheets here. And I'm just going to pull over most of this styling. It's pretty simple styling. I don't really think we need anything else on there. And what we'll do is we'll jump in here where it has a UL for the list of items and an LI as well. We'll have an A item in here, which will have the style for that. The rest of the styles, I'll do as list style as none. Let's save that, refresh, and we'll hit up our menu and go to the About Us and take a look at it. So the styling is pretty good there. We're getting essentially what we're after, but we still have some of these items not working exactly how we want. We need this one here to be a display of inline block. Let's save that. And we also need to remove the margins. So we'll do margin as 0 and padding as 0. We'll apply this to the LI item as well. Let's refresh and try again. Great. So that's looking a lot better now. And there's a few ways we can make sure that these items are using up the proper width for the page. In this example, we only have 4 items at any one time. So we could use a grid structure for this, for example, or we could use flex. And in this case, I'm going to opt in for maybe trying something out that just works. And I'd personally like to give grids a go. I haven't really used them much before, but they seem like a good use case in this example. So let's take a look at how we can do this. Bear with me while I test this out because I haven't really done this before, but let's do a display of grid here. And for that, I might use something like a grid template of columns. And I believe the units are 1FR, 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 1FR to make one fractional unit for each. And that makes sense, I suppose. Then I suppose the LI can be a block so that it utilizes all of the space in those grid sections. So let's refresh and see if that applies okay. So it looks like it has. The only other thing I want to do is a gap. So let's have a look what the thing here is for gap. I believe it's just called column gap maybe, or not too sure. Let me take a quick look. All right, I believe it's just grid gap. So I'm gonna give that a shot. Let's do grid dash gap. And in here, we're gonna do maybe 15 pixels and see how that looks. Let's refresh and open up our menu over here. Whoops. There we go. And it looks like that has applied. It's got 15 pixels going from the bottom, the top, the left, and the right. So maybe we can make this a bit more specific. Maybe we just do grid gap on column. So grid column gap, maybe? Let's have a look. I think it's just called column gap. So let's try column gap, and here we'll do 15 pixels. And yeah, that looks like it's working a little bit better. If we take a look at our design here, that looks like it's all good. And what we'll do is we'll resize this and see if it resizes accordingly. So that does seem to be resizing quite well. I suppose what we need to do next is make sure that the responsive design elements for this work as well. To fix that up, I might just make the font size here ridiculously large, maybe something like 40 or 50 pixels, just so that it blatantly cannot fit in. And if we take a look here, when we're getting a bit smaller, they're not really collapsing very well. So let's see how we can make these grids collapse properly. All right, to get them to properly collapse, we'll have to redo the grid template. So in this case, we'll need to set the grid columns to be a repeat. And in this repeat, we want 4 items, each at 1 fractional unit, I suppose. So let's refresh and give that a shot. And we're going to resize it now and see if it applies. So here it doesn't seem to be working just yet. So we might still have to play around with that a little bit more. Something we might be missing is a min-max. So I'm going to give that a shot as well and see if that fixes it up. So the min-max in this might be, say, 200 pixels. So that way, let's apply that and see what happens. We'll resize again, and no, that's still not exactly collapsing the way I want it to. Let's see what's happening. Let's have a look at the width for this. So the width on most of these items are 280 pixels. So I'm going to increase this here to maybe 300 pixels, maybe even, let's do 300 pixels and see how that works. So now at 300 pixels, if we resize this and make it smaller, it's very possible that, it's not getting smaller because the width of the page is staying the same. So obviously that's not going to collapse, right? Let's take a look over here. If we set its parent for this margin from the left to have a width of maybe 400 pixels, would that affect the design? Nope. We're going to have to test this out a little bit more. All right, something I might do is set the repeat to autofill with a min-max size of either 285 pixels or 1 fractional unit and a gap of 15. Let's give that a shot and see how that looks. So that seems to have made all our units work out okay there, and as we're resizing, those seem to be collapsing out quite well. I'm gonna reduce the font size on here and take off that 50 pixels and try that again. So we'll take a look at what that looks like now in our design. And what we'll do is we'll keep resizing it down, and we can see that it is collapsing quite well there. And at each level, it's collapsing for being very responsive. I might even reduce some of the sizing there, because even at 200 to 300 pixels, that's quite a lot. So I might do it to 50 pixels, give that a second test. Let's expand this out a little bit. So let's see when it collapses. So it's collapsing just about here. Maybe we'll reduce this to 200 pixels and try that again. Yep, so that's a little bit better. So now we have 3, now we have 2, and that'll probably go down to 1 if we get into a very mobile-like design. So that's a good use of grid there. I'm pretty happy with that. We can take a look at adding our second menu item here for our collections now. So let's see if we can pull in the second menu that we created. We're just going to jump back into our header, and we're going to create another WP menu. But in this case, let's have a look at what we're trying to grab. We're trying to grab the second menu, and this menu will have its own ID. If we take a look at this one here for the primary, it's currently set as a primary menu, but our collections one is actually set with an ID of 3 up here in the URL. So we're going to jump in here and we're going to see if we can set a manual ID. Let's see what we can do for that. So in this case, this one here says primary menu. I'm going to set this ID to 3 over here and see if that works. Hopefully it does. Not too sure. No, that's not the right tag we're trying to do. So we're going to have a look. We're going to remove this main menu one because we don't want this tag being repeated if this is an ID that's being set. And if we take a look quickly over here, we can see that maybe no ID is being set, but that's okay. Anyway, so pulling in that ID there for menu item 3, we have to use a custom variable here for the array. And let's have a look what that is. If we jump on the WordPress website, we can have a look at what options we have here. And in this case, we've got an option called menu. And we can pass this in here just like this, ideally. And we're going to pass in the number 3 in this case, I believe. And hopefully that'll just work. So yes, it did. And there's our next menu. We're going to give it its own title. And if we come up here, we'll paste this title here in as, I believe, collections, I think it was, or our collections. So let's paste this in over here. And let's refresh that. Just make sure that it shows up. So there it is. The only difference here is it looks like the font size for this one is a little bit smaller. This one only starts at 60. So let's jump in and change this one. We'll have this one over here as a title, and this one can be maybe a subtitle. And this one will start off with that font size 60 with maybe a margin top of 30. And that can stay a margin top maybe of 45 pixels. And that can reduce in font size as we go down in the responsive design. And I'm going to pass this class over here straight into our header and see how that looks. We're going to refresh that, and there it is. And that's looking a little bit better. And we also have one more menu there for the blog. So we could probably copy this over across. And this one here can be essentially called blog. And this will be menu item 4. We haven't created this just yet, but we can. Let's click create menu, call it blog. And let's have a look at some of the items we have here. Create Instagram photography. Let's put these in. Create Instagram and photography. Great. So ideally that just works. Let's jump into our website and refresh it once more and see if it applies. All right, great. So it's just down here. We're going to add a little bit of padding to our CSS for this component. And this is just so that we can scroll a little bit more down, and that way we can see all the components in there. Let's do that, and there we go. So this navigation is looking good. The only issue here is this Fred Snow item is not scrolling along with our navigation, so we're going to have to fix that. So there's a few ways we could do this. We could, for example, not use this element here because, for example, if we scroll down, it sort of doesn't really exist with our website. It's sort of outside of that. And we can create a copy of it in our navigation here. So let's see how we could do this. Let's jump into our header over here, which is just hiding. And over here, we do have this item here for the logo. We could copy this whole thing out and we could possibly paste it straight into our menu overlay. Now, I'm not too sure how that'll look, but there's only one way to find out. The only other thing we'll need to do is over here where we're changing it so that it exists on top of all our elements. Because it's using that body class, we're going to have to remove that. We can maybe have a look at doing that styling a bit later, but for the time being, let's just do that and hit menu over here. So that's looking a little bit better. We do have it existing in our set section, but we also have to remove its positioning because right now it's positioning on top of our elements. So we'll jump in here, we'll jump into the top menu, we'll remove this Z index from existing essentially. Let's refresh that once more. And finally, we have this element over here that we created earlier. And instead of this being in the body tag, we're going to put this here into our menu overlay. And this will inverse the logo when we're applying it inside the menu. So now that should just work. Let's have a look. So most of this is working, but we're still having some issue here. Let's see what that is. So the padding from the top, we could probably remove some of that. I'm just going to remove all of it for the time being. That's a little bit better. Now the second part is this item here is still appearing. And that's because this section here still has that Z index. So when we removed the Z index previously, we actually removed it from the menu, and that was the wrong one. We want to keep that on the menu. Let's put that back in and we'll remove it from the logo. So now if we refresh, it's on the menu and our logo is still there, but the sizing is a little bit off. And I think that's because we're logged into WordPress admin and it's offsetting the design a little bit there. But now if we expand it out, we can see that it's working just fine. So that's really cool. I'm pretty happy with that. We can now have a look at building out the final bit here, which is the contact form, and then working on some more responsive design. So this element works on all sizes, but hopefully, you know, it's ready to go. It's working really well. So that's really cool. Let's see what else we need to get done over here. So these menu items are going to have to change a little bit when they exist in this navigation, simply because their hover effect doesn't really work anymore. So what we'll do for them is we'll update some of their styling and override what we're currently setting here. So for that, we can see that we've got a couple of different configurations happening, but essentially over here, let's jump in and update that. So this is the content for that. And what we'll want to do is for the hover over here, we'll want to make the background stay base. Let's see if that applies. And we'll refresh. We'll jump in here and that's not applying just yet. So where are we going wrong? So this is for the menu overlay A tag. And what's happening here is on that hover, it's staying white while the background isn't. So we could probably fix this up by pulling in the class that it's being derived from, in this case, social media. And then we'll pull in the A tag over here and we'll apply the hover effect with a color of base. Let's give that a shot now. We'll refresh, and now if we hover over it, it's working as intended and it's overriding that color, which is what we want. Next up, let's have a look at the responsive design elements here. We're going to resize it slowly. And as we get to a smaller size, we can see the menus popped up here. Now the problem with that menu up there is that it's not calling our JavaScript function. So we'll need to make sure that it is. Let's go toggle. Where's our toggle JavaScript option, which is over here. And we'll want to apply it on the menu. And let's have a look where that is. So that should be here on the top bar, and that should be here in the A tag. And we're just going to replace that with this toggle. Now, if we refresh the page and hit this menu, it's working as intended. So that's good. Let's keep resizing over here and see what happens. We'll resize this down to essentially a mobile view almost. So that still seems to be working really well. So I think we can leave that as is. Obviously, the only difference now is that if we scroll down a little bit and hit menu, its overlay is a little bit funky, and that's because it's still trying to give priority to this header section. So in order to fix that, we'll need to make sure that header section stays fixed when we hit that. And to do that, we're going to jump in here and find it. So if we have a look at our layout, we've got this top ID here. And what we're going to do is when this body tag has an if menu is active, we're going to set this to maybe a position of fixed. And that way it'll just pop up there at the top. So let's give that a shot. That's good. The only other things we'll have to do is make sure that it exists from the left and the right. Let's refresh that once more. And double check that that style is applying, because it might not be. So it is applying the fixed, but it's not applying the left and the right. Let's refresh that once more. Maybe it hasn't updated yet. There we go. So that's updated now. So that menu is staying at the top there. It doesn't matter if we refresh or not, but when we do refresh, it's no longer fixed. So that's essentially what we want. Now, if we expand out again, then we've got our menu up here, but that disappears. So this menu here, I like the fact that it's being fixed. And what I might do is I might fix it even when we're scrolling. So let's have a look where we can do that. We can jump into the header here. And I think it exists as a top menu, right? So that's the class over here. Let's find it. And this is it here. Right now it's a position of absolute. And we're going to change that to fixed and see what happens when we apply that. We'll refresh here. And that's fixed now. And it's scrolling over our elements. And now whenever we hit menu, it's still there. So that's a cool way to run this. And then as soon as we get any smaller, we've got the menu now at the top. Great. Let's have a look how this works on the home page. So it's pulling in from the right there. It's scrolling with us constantly. And when we hit menu, it expands out. It's working well. And as we get smaller in the interface, it's collapsing. Here's an issue that we're having. So this top bar here, it's got a background, but its Z index hasn't been applied properly yet. So what we're going to do as well is we're going to set a manual Z index up here. And we're going to have this Z index at maybe 3000. And we'll do that for the top bar as well. So that way we don't have this image taking priority. So there, that's been fixed up. And now if we take a look at that, that's working a lot better. And here that image isn't overlaying anymore. Great. So now that we've got these sections up, let's have a look here. We've got this contact us bar. And I think we've already got one of those for the footer. So let's scroll down here to the footer. And there it is. So we can copy this whole section in here and paste it into our navigation. So let's do that. Let's jump in here to our footer. And here is our element for that. It's an entire section. Where is it? Here it is. And this is a wrapper for our footer. And here is our margin left for it. So that's what we essentially want to copy. And what we're going to do is in our header here, straight after this, this menu section that we create for the menu overlay, and after the second item here, we're going to create another div. Now this div can exist here in this margin from the left. That way it should work a little bit better. I'm just going to reuse this element so it's separate. But I'll also wrap it in another element, and this element might be something like a header contact form. And let's give this a bit more description. We'll call this menu overlay header, menu overlay contact form. So that's a bit more descriptive. And over here, where we've got our menu overlay, we'll update some of the styling so that it applies the same styling that we have for our footer. So here's our footer styling. And we've got some H2 styling, some other styling going on here. And ideally what we want to do is we want to also apply the same sort of styling, but only for the elements in here. So I'm going to close this off and I'm going to reapply it so that we don't have all the styling, but we have most of it. I'll just put this in with a comma and reset it here. And that should apply the same sort of styling. Let's save that and refresh and take a look if that takes effect. So our footer here still stays the same, but then we should have, do we have a footer down here? It looks like we do. So we've got this section here for a H2 tag, but the colors don't seem to be applying for some reason. Let's see why that is. So in here, we do have the color. Do we have the color white? Yeah, we do. And in here, it might be that the menu overlay is now, background. No, that's all good. That's all good. So why is this color not white? Let me have a look. Alright, I think I know why it is. It's because it doesn't have a position of relative, so it's being forced out. So we're going to give it a position of relative with a z index of 3000. And let's give that another shot. We're going to hit the menu over here, and there it is. So that's looking good. We can still fix up some of the design elements and give it some padding. So over here, I might do a margin from the top of about 100 pixels. Give that a test, see how it looks. So that looks a little bit better. Let's see what we have for the other ones from the margin from the top. It's actually only 45 pixels. So let's fix that up. And then on top of that, we've got a menu here which collapses just about there. So why is that? That's because I think the margin from the left here is set to a max width without a margin on the right. So we might have to apply some of those elements as well. Let's jump in here to the footer and copy this margin from the left and apply it in here. Then we can refresh and have a look at our menu, and that's working a lot better now. Let's take a look at our design. It does have a lot more padding going on there. Like this one here is 96. And this one here is 170, more or less. So I'm going to increase this to 150 here. And then for the other sections down here, where we had a margin from the top of 45, I'm going to make this 75 pixels. And this will reduce as we go down to maybe 50 pixels and then 30 pixels. Finally, the other elements we were looking at here, for the margin from the top, we also want to have some responsive elements for that. So we might reduce that down to maybe 100 pixels on MD and then maybe only 50 pixels for SM. Let's refresh that and give it a test. So now when we open it up, we've got a lot more room there to breathe. Everything's spaced out really well. If we resize this now and go further down, we can see that it is responding quite well and everything's collapsing great for that menu. Now I am getting a strange issue here where I was getting a bit of an overlap on my content. So let's see what that was. Here it is. It's sort of pulling in a little bit from the right and left here. And I think it might be this element from this margin from the left. So why is it doing that? Let's take a look. So all of these elements look good, but one of them isn't working correctly. What I'll do is I'll just apply a overflow hidden here so that this element doesn't cause the scroll bar, and that should fix it up. So now we can resize it and it works on all levels and it's updating very well. So that looks good. That's our menu done and dusted, and it's very usable now. It works on all levels. It works on any side of the page. We can call it from the right side. We can call it from the top as well. So that's very useful. And it's got a nice little effect there as well, so that it sort of reminds you of taking a photograph. Great. So it looks like this website is coming together quite well. In the next part, we'll take a look at finishing up some of the blog sections and maybe even building out some of the e-commerce components. I hope you liked this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.